it doesn't get easier with success. And I think this is the thing, is we go, when I just have enough money, it'll go away. Or when the business just does this, I still see myself saying that in various different ways. And it doesn't.
So that's not true?
I mean, I'm not a super wealthy guy, but no, it's not. It's just, there's a guy that I work with on some stuff, like some personal stuff. And I remember asking him something about like financial anxiety, because that's how it all manifests for me, is financial anxiety, usually outside of logic, which makes it hard to work with because I can't equate it down and solve it. It's a nonsensical thing.
Today, we're joined by Mike Scott, a seasoned entrepreneur, business advisor, and technology leader with over 20 years of experience. Mike is a two-time founder who led Nona Digital, a globally respected FinTech and blockchain development agency, through a successful high seven-figure acquisition in 2022. Now based in Australia, Mike splits his time between coaching small business founders and leadership teams and serving as director at Warp Development. Mike brings deep insight into what it takes to lead effectively, scale with purpose, and stay ahead in fast-moving markets. Whether you're a founder navigating growth or a leader looking to sharpen your strategy, this conversation promises valuable lessons from someone who's done it, learned from it, and is now helping others to do the same. Mike, welcome to Tales from the Top.
Thank you for the kind intro. Glad to be here, guys. Yeah, thank you.
So, Mike, you grew up in South Africa in the 90s. Can you tell us a bit about that experience and who and what were some of your biggest interests and influences?
Yeah. So, as you say, growing up in South Africa in the 90s was interesting. I mean, I was too young to really know what Nelson Mandela's release from prison in 1994 really meant. I mean, I was 12, but certainly lived through some very strange things if you're looking at it through Australian eyes. Grew up in a family of 6, so I'm the youngest of 4 boys, which explains a fair amount. But my parents are and were remarkable, and I'm very grateful to them. But it was very clear that there was no money coming. So I wouldn't say we were poor, but we certainly didn't have a lot. Mm-hmm. And we went to good schools because we were quite good at sport generally. And in South Africa, all sport is played through schools, not clubs. So if you're good at sport, you go to good schools. The reason I'm mentioning that is all my friends were wealthy. So it was just really obvious to me very early that from a financial perspective, no one was coming to save us. Now, I wouldn't trade that. I want to be clear about this. My parents gave us more than what money could. Yeah. But what that catalyzed just subconsciously was I was an entrepreneur from as long as I could remember. When I was 7 years old, I would pull a skateboard around the streets with a basket and my mom's dishwashing liquid and wash cars for 2 rand, which is like 15 cents. Right. And it just didn't stop. Right. And all my brothers are entrepreneurs. So it was a clear thing. And so were my parents, just not very good entrepreneurs. Oh, okay. Great parents, great people, not very good entrepreneurs.
Shout out to mum and dad.
Yeah, love you, mum and dad, but that's not for you strong. So in terms of influences, I think my earliest influence, who's still an influence today, is my cousin, Damien. So he's the same age as me. We were very close. We would still be if we weren't sort of so far away, but he's done the full hardcore Silicon Valley growth, hyperscale exit, knows Elon Musk, dates celebrities, right. ultra smart, just an amazing human being. And from a very early age, he was just this standard of performance, I guess you could say. So, there's lots of places we could go down this path, but I guess sort of the summary up to that point is South Africa, very corrupt government. It's illegal to do business with government or business unless you are 51% not white male owned. So I'll just paint the picture for you, right? So here everyone tries to get, business from, I don't know, BHP or Santos or whatever. And the government and defense in South Africa, as a white male, you can't. It's literally illegal. So, that's for a good reason.
Oh, that's current.
That's current. Yeah, it's called BEE, right. Broad-based economic empowerment. And we won't get into political on this show, but it's for a good reason in principle. It's because of how terribly non-whites were treated. And I'm all for that. But like a lot of things, it's maybe gone too far the other way and it's become super corrupt as well.
Yes, the pendulum is swinging and slicing hard.
Yeah. And there are people that exercise it with great outcomes, and there are people that take advantage. But I'm just painting the picture. So in South Africa, it's kind of like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, it's a hard place to be an entrepreneur, right? It's like the things are stacked against you. So fast forward through schooling, I loved my school career because if you're good at sport in South Africa, school's very easy and fun. So I loved school. I literally didn't own half of my textbooks for my final year. I didn't open a page. I didn't study. I did not care at all. Right, all my friends were pretty smart.
Yeah.
So I passed with like a matric exemption. I don't know what it's called here, but you can get into university.
So sport only.
Sport and social.
Okay.
I loved school. I absolutely loved it. And I knew I was smart enough to not fail.
Yes.
I certainly wouldn't call myself smart or academic.
Yeah.
But I knew I wasn't going to university, guys. Like all my friends were. I was like, if I go to uni, I have to get student loans. It's going to take me 4 years to get a degree. Then I'm going to have to go and get a job somewhere. I'm just going to shortcut all of that, which was a terrible decision for a long time. So started my first business at school. So TS Technologies, it still exists today, believe it or not. It's an MSP, so like an IT support business.
Right.
Recession-proof, hated it because it owned me. I didn't own it. But it taught me a lot, mostly about what not to do.
So you sold that business?
Sold that business like 17 years later.
Right.
Yeah. And that business was really interesting from a learnings perspective. But like an interesting thing to share there was for the majority of that business, I didn't feel like I owned a business. I felt like the business owned me. And I think probably the biggest lesson and pain that I went through in that business, well, I'll say there's two things. But the first one was don't ever let yourself build a key person dependency in your business to the point where you have people that can completely hold you ransom.
Yep.
Because that's what happened to me. I allowed a guy into the business who seemed great. I allowed him to sort of make me believe that he was irreplaceable and indispensable and he was the only person in the world that could do this thing. And I totally bought it. And I just made bad decision after bad decision after bad decision.
Your 20s at this time?
I'm in my 20s, yeah. And he's 10 years older than me, this guy. So he,
So he purports to be the big brother type who...
not the big brother, but the guy that I need or I'll die as a business, And he did a very successful job of selling me down that river. And, we could talk about that for the whole podcast, but I like really, because of the pain that I went through there, I just kind of vowed once I eventually did just rip the Band-Aid off and get rid of him and surprise, surprise, everything got better, that I'd never let that happen again because it's not a nice way to live. Right. And I see that happen, unfortunately, with sort of too many of my clients still. And I almost have to play a role quite often now to not to tell them that they don't need them, but to get them to see that they actually don't need them. Because they very seldom do, because everybody's replaceable. Like everybody is replaceable, right? Unless you are, I don't know, some hardcore specialist surgeon maybe, but that's not where I play. So that business, that was the one big lesson. The other big lesson in that business was cash flow. So I told you my parents didn't have a lot of money, and because this business was my first, I was running this business straight out of school. So what that really means was when my friends were at the beach, I would go to the beach and not work. And every night was a party. And so I wasn't really running a business, right? So
I had a business like that.
It was beer money, right? Really.
It lasted a couple of years.
Yeah. And I regretted not going to uni for about 6 years until I started taking it seriously. But I ran the business into the ground. And I remember a very difficult moment where I had to go to my dad, who didn't have money, and say, Dad, this is the situation. Like basically this business is dead and I owe money to suppliers. And he sat me down and he said, I'll give you the money, which you didn't really have to give, to bail you out on the condition that you do this cash flow every day until you fix this. I was like, what's a cash flow? I'm like 24 years old now. What's a cash flow projection? My dad doesn't know how to use a computer, still really doesn't. So it was by hand. So picture like an Excel document with a cash projection that he literally made me do by hand. So when you're updating every column, you're rubbing the pencil out and you're writing it. It's one of the best things
I was going to say, that must
I've ever learned in business.
Those analog type of actions really cement.
They cemented, but also just, fast forward 15 years and I had a mentor who was basically a billionaire. He used to just have this mantra. The first part you would have heard, the third part of it you might not have, but he just used to say to me all the time, he would say, Mike, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is the only reality. And he just drilled this into my head. Basically, it's how I think about business now, is revenue means nothing to me. When I start working with a client, quite often I'll say, how's your performance in your business? And they'll give me a revenue number. They'll either go, revenue's flat, or they'll say, revenue's down, or they'll very proudly say, revenue's up 20%. And I'll go, don't care. What do you mean? Don't care. It means literally nothing to me. Then they'll say, well, what do you care about? I'll say, talk to me about your ability to generate free cash flow. Most people don't even know what that means until you do. And that is a business's purpose, unless you're getting into venture-backed businesses and some pretty complicated business models. But a standard business, especially a services business, your goal is to generate free cash flow. And so few business operators really understand this. And I'll give an example to you.
Today's episode is sponsored by us, Kyron Audio and Deverson Design.
At Kyron, we enrich people's lives with music systems that create lifelike three-dimensional images that evoke real emotional responses and allow true connection to recorded music. With our strategic partners, we can help you create the ultimate environment to enjoy your Kyron music system. From interior design guidance through to an entire bespoke listening room, we can assist you to bring your dream to life. Life is better with music, and music is better with Kyron.
Deverson Design creates luxury garage environments for the discerning automotive collector, preserving your collection in surroundings that are more gallery than garage, and so enhancing the value of your enjoyment. With projects across Australia and Europe, Deverson Design provides design services worldwide. Truly bespoke garages start with inspiring designs. Let Deverson Design inspire you.
To get in touch with one of our principals directly, visit our website, kyronaudio.com.au or deversondesign.com.au to book a consultation.
And now on with the show.
Usually in a small business, when you're quite immature in business, you have this moment where your accountant tells you you've made a profit at the end of the year. And he says, well done, you've made $15,000 of profit. And you go, great, where is it? It's not in my bank account. Where is it?
Gone.
Profit doesn't mean that much either. The ability to generate free cash flow. To this day, I run that same cash flow forecast that my dad gave me when I was 24 on paper. I still run it, thankfully, in a Google Sheets version.
Right. I was going to say, is it still on paper?
Still to this day. And it's
Mm-hmm.
the thing that's gotten me out of more trouble than anything else in business.
That'd be great if we could share that with our audience, actually.
With pleasure. With pleasure. It's. I have shared it quite a few times on LinkedIn just to say, hey, if you want to schedule a call with me, just for free, I'll take 5 people. And every time I do it, always 40 people reach out and people love it. And then inevitably I'll get a message a couple of months later by some cool aspiring entrepreneur going, my God, that was terrifying. But for the first time in my life, I actually can see where I'm going. Usually it's quite bad, but at least you can see it.
I can feel for that guy. Every time I talk to you, I feel like that. So
I'm sorry.
it's always wonderful, but it's always so intense. But it's I always come out with, and it's not often what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear.
That's the South African in me,
and that's what I'm always grateful for. But you have to be ready for it.
I'm not there. It's not that I don't want to be nice, but nice isn't valuable in this context, right? Valuable is valuable, and nice is for friends, and that's cool. But in this role, when I'm wearing this hat, I'm trying to provide value to people because it's what I was so desperate for. And I do care, believe it or not, Lee. But this is how I show it. This is how I show it. So that was that business. I mean, that business was a terrible business. It was terribly managed. It was so short-sighted with everything, but we learned a lot, right? It was a services business. It was really thankless because in that kind of industry, at best, your customers are just not complaining. Like at best, it's just quiet. But then when it's quiet, they phone you and you say, why are you charging us so much money on the retainer? Because nothing's broken. And you're like, I know. That's why we're charging you money. And then they don't pay you or they're shouting at you. So it wasn't a very nice business.
We had a similar conversation last month with Brandon Gian, head of design. And that was the same analogy he used around design. You only notice it when it's broken.
Yeah. And business models like that are tricky because it's a difficult thing to quantify. A smart business person phones you and says, hey, Mike, you're charging us this SLA and it's whatever, $1,000 a month. But we haven't used you or heard from you in 4 months. Do we really need to pay this? And you're like, well, the reason you haven't is because we've been, but they don't see that. And perception is reality, So we almost had to do these silly things in that business where I just send the technicians to the client site just to be there.
Wow.
Just go and do some stuff.
Yeah.
So they feel like you're there, and that's an interesting learning. In the remote world, that's even more difficult, but that's why it's all contracted in now, right? And that's where lessons come in with contracts and, what have you. Yeah. So that business sort of ambled along. And there's something happened with, I just shouldn't sort of breach confidentiality, but something happened with a good friend of mine, and he sort of needed a bit of help. So I gave him a job in this business. Fast forward now to 2012, I think. And
still in South Africa?
Still in South Africa. I only moved to Australia in 2019. Yeah. So still in South Africa. We're still running this business. It's grown to, I think, about 20 people. It's doing fine. It's nothing exciting. And I'm feeling a bit like, shit, is this going to be my life? Running a tech support business that I hate. I don't really want this, right? And I can't really see an out, really. But too proud to admit it. Too late. I felt like it's too late to go to university now. It's like, damn, I should have actually gone and done business science or what have you. And all my friends are now. So there's this, there's this.
And you're around about 24, 25.
So what am I in 2012, born in 1982? So who's good at maths here? So probably
30.
About 30. That was sharp. Yeah, there we go. So about 30. Just about to get married, still no kids, which is an important factor in building businesses. I have no idea how people do it with kids from scratch. It's just a whole nother ballgame. I don't think
let me tell you all about it. I wouldn't want to fall asleep, so I'm so tired from looking at kids.
Yeah, exactly. So this guy comes along and give him a job in my business just to kind of help him get through something. And very smart, very charismatic guy. And he works in this business for a while, doesn't really do much, but I don't blame him because there isn't really much excitement in the business. But he says to me, listen, you got to meet this dude, Ed. He's the smartest guy I've come across. He's studying actuarial science. He's just an absolute whiz kid, but he's super good with tech, and got to meet him and don't really take it too seriously. And anyway, long story short, I meet Ed. Ed's like, you got to meet Gordon, and Ed and Gordon are building websites for holiday beer money while they're studying, just the typical sort of thing. And I say to them, well, listen, I need a website built. So they build me a website for, I think in dollars, probably about $800 or something. Great experience, excellent website, deliver it on time, just before the Christmas break. Can you please pay us? Because this is our holiday money. So I offer them a job, Ed and Gordon. And they're like, no, we won't take a job, but we'll work with you. We'll start a business with you. So I'm running this tech business. All my clients, we're fixing computers and supplying networking gear and stuff, and they just assume that a techie is a techie. So they're always asking us to build websites, but we're like, we don't do this. It's not the same thing. Kept outsourcing it, kept having terrible experiences. Then I was like, guys, you're great. Can I employ you? They said, hell no, but let's start a business together. So we started a business with what I thought was going to be 3 shareholders, but then the guy who introduced us was like, well, I brought you guys together, so I'm in 2.
Give me 25%.
And then Ed and Gordon said, well, we're only doing it if you bring in this guy Paul along because he's like a genius and he needs to be in the mix. So the next thing, there's 5 of us sitting around a table starting a new business. What do you think the shareholding split was?
Not good for you, I'm guessing.
100 divided by 5.
Right.
Massive lesson that's worth double-clicking on here. I've got to be careful what I say because if anyone listens to this, it won't be great. But
it's only our parents.
Yeah, it's only us.
Good. Well, hi, Lee's mom and dad, and Dad's mom and dad. Not having a difficult conversation up front probably cost me upward of, I don't know, $1.5 to $2 million.
Goodness.
Right.
Not having a tough conversation. And here's the thing. When you're starting a business, the reason that most people will go, all right, guys, we're starting a business. There's 3 of us. Guess what the shareholding split is? 33 and a third percent. Why is that? Why do you think we do that?
It's got to be a pre-programmed sense of justice and fairness that we all think because it's what we learned to school. There's a bag of lollies and we're all going to get a third each.
Yeah, you cut it and the other person chooses the half.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And because it's bloody uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's a tough.
Because I can almost guarantee you no one's sitting there thinking, hey, this is going to transpire that we're going to put in exactly the same amount of value. Like it's just no one in their right mind would think that. But then we go, oh, this is uncomfortable. We'll just do this. But here's the thing. That is the least uncomfortable that it's ever going to be. It's only going to get more uncomfortable because that's the point at which there is nothing to divide. Yet we avoid it. Right. So huge lesson. Huge lesson. Don't do that. Have the uncomfortable conversation at that point because it is the least uncomfortable it's ever going to do. It's kind of like your prenup before you get married. Like, have it while it's still good. Don't try and have that conversation when it's too late. It's just, but it doesn't feel like it at the time.
No.
And everybody thinks they're different.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, I've just literally weeks ago, we're co-founding a new business with 3 guys.
Congratulations.
We'll see. And, I'm having this conversation, and these are good, accomplished guys. They're smart. They're not young anymore. We're not 20. They're older than me. They've all exited multi-million-dollar businesses. And I'm sitting there going, all right, guys, we're going to start this, but we're not splitting this 3 ways. And the conversation begins. And I'm like, but there's a book that's been written on this called Slicing the Pie, where he lays out a beautiful mechanism to do this. And I won't bore you with the mechanics, but basically it's very simple. It's just, you just agree on what the inputs are. So it's time, money, contacts, resources. Then you agree on a multiplier. Whatever is the most scarce gets the highest multiplier. And you just keep a track of it. After a year or 6 months or whatever you agree, you say, where are we?
Yeah.
I guarantee you're not going to be equal. But now you can have the conversation and say, all right, well, this is showing that Mike's put in 10%, Bob's put in 40%, and Kevin's put in, what's the difference, 50%. 50. Let's have that conversation. And it probably doesn't end there, but it definitely doesn't end split. And I'm going on about this because there's just such a massive lesson, specifically in shareholding when you start a business. But just like have the hard conversations. This is the thing.
Yeah.
Bring value, not niceness.
Yes.
And
people
need to, if they fail to, they get into a business because on a Saturday night, they're all thinking, well, it's great to meet you. I've never met you before, but you seem to be on the right wavelength. And then they start the equivalent of a marriage on the strength of a conversation or an idea that they like, get involved and start moving things ahead without actually understanding truly what the other person's like. And then that divorce inevitably ends when we wouldn't necessarily meet someone on Saturday and get married on a Monday and think we can have a happy, harmonious marriage for the next 44 years. So why do we do that in business? And a lot of people do.
100%. And it is like a divorce. Fast forward over Nona's inception, we had one of the guys left, and we can talk about that in a minute, about 2 years in. Another one left about 4 or 5 years in. The first one was not too bad. The second one was like a divorce. I mean, there were tears.
Deeply emotional and very expensive.
Deeply emotional. Still love this guy today. Very expensive, incredibly emotional and difficult and complex and nuanced and difficult to unwind. Man, it was horrible. Like I get PTSD thinking about it. It was the amount of emotion and cost, but also just waste. Like you waste months of each other's lives in this thing. And it was for the best, and he's landed on his feet, and we did too, and it was definitely the right thing. But it was horrible for everybody, And that's the thing is, like, another lesson for me was in the first business, TS Tech. I had a number of sort of false starts with business partners, and I kind of vowed to myself, I'll never have a business partner. I'll always be in business on my own. Had some false starts and some bad experiences at Nona, but ended up with business partners that I would go to war with. That when I go to South Africa, I usually get 1 free weekend today still. These are the guys I choose to spend my 1 free weekend with, is these guys still. These guys have become like my family. Now my vow is the opposite. I will never start another business alone. It's just not worth it. It's lonely. It's horrible. Even when you're successful, it's shit for me. It's just, you got to share it with people, you know? So Nona started off, we started this business with 5 shareholders, essentially building WordPress microsites. So funny story, the first job we ever did was about $400 and we never got paid for it, which is quite funny. Like to this day.
Did you stick that one up at the work wall?
We kind of did, but we never got paid because we never actually finished it, which is even worse. But it's just, there was a cool client. He's a lovely guy, Jeremy. And it's just, we started a project. He just didn't need it anymore. And it was just this weird.
It just petered out.
Just petered out. But it was like, that's how we started our business. $400 project that never got paid for and never finished.
Perfect.
Not a good start. Just to give you context of the growth of the business though, that first project was $400 for the whole project. By the time we were acquired 10 years later, we pretty much wouldn't take a project for less than about $50,000 a month run rate.
Goodness.
So when we started, we did not think we were going to get there.
Yep.
We thought we were going to build WordPress microsites better, faster, and a little bit cheaper than the other guys. But very quickly, we recognized that most people doing this thing are really not very good. Another lesson there. We never try to be the best. We just tried to be a little bit better than everyone else. And a little bit better than what's commonly available usually really puts you in another level. It's quite weird. There's actually usually not that much of a difference between what you consider average and excellent. It's actually really small. And it's a concept that's really helped me.
Do you think that's just to service businesses, or does that go for product as well, do you think?
I can see your mind ticking over.
Yeah, well, mine was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. I'm not a product guy.
Yeah.
But we built products
Yep.
for people. That's all we did.
Digital products.
We built software for people. That's heavy product. So we were a weird business. We were heavily product centric, but a services business. We sold time for money, but that time was building product. Yes, I do think it is true. Like, I think it's true. It's an opinion, not a fact.
That's not something I'd ever considered.
Is it like a strategic excellence decision? You're working out the excellence in the amount of effort you need to become your best for the environment you're in, as opposed to simply blindly going on and being the absolute best when 7 will do, 8 will get you in the front, but then you probably waste time and effort. Possibly, this may be cynical, trying to achieve 9 and 10 when you don't need to.
Is it more like the 80-20 rule? Is that the idea?
I think the 80-20 rule comes into it. I think what it's more about is like we thought a lot about moments of delight for customers, both in terms of building them to give moments of delight. I mean, both of you guys do that, whether you call that that in your businesses or not.
Yeah, we
it's
do.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? It's a common term.
Yes.
But I love the term.
Yeah.
Because it's not saying moments of extreme delivery and excellence. It's just moments of delight.
Yeah, okay.
And when you look at your moments of delight, they're usually not these step changes. They're usually just considered a little bit extra things.
Yeah.
So, for example, the new business,
consistent, isn't it?
regular, not consistent.
Yeah.
I'd say regular, not consistent.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just, the best compliment we ever got from a client was, Nona is the kind of business that paints the back of the wardrobe, because if you want to be in the best in the world, that's the kind of thing that you do. And I just loved that. Like,
I'm going to use that.
And he was such a difficult client, like which was made it even better.
The parallel there is with restoring cars. A car that's been restored properly is one where the things you cannot see are restored as well as the things you can.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's one of my mantras.
Yeah.
How do you behave when nobody's watching?
Yes. Yep.
And
so you do go to level 8 and 9 and 10, even though 7 will suffice.
But I think the difference between like 7 and 8 is not as big as people think.
Yeah.
It's kind of where I think I'm going here is a lot of people are just like 2.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
It is true.
Like a lot of people
Very
are just
true.
crap.
It is.
Yeah.
And then you get the extreme version. Like, I don't know if you've heard of a book called Unreasonable Hospitality. It's worth reading. It's about 11 Madison. It's this very famous restaurant in Madison Avenue, which has got like a 4-year wait list. And I haven't been there, but there's an amazing Netflix series called The Bear about the chef.
Yep.
It's very much that restaurant features consistently in there. And it's just this ludicrous level of hospitality. They research you for a year before they come. They know everything about you when you arrive. They'll know that like your favorite pizza is a pepperoni pizza, and then they'll bring it to you in this Michelin star restaurant in a way that's like, it's just ridiculous. Like the hospitality level it's unreasonable. It's literally what they call it. It's unreasonable levels. You don't need to do that.
Right.
I love that they're doing it, but that's not what you have to do to be better. You've just got to be a little bit better than the other guy, And I think this is lost a lot. I actually heard Toby Pierce say something which I loved. And he was like, most of us focus on trying to beat the other guys and do more better or more or faster, where what we really should be doing is just focusing on doing less wrong and let them make the mistakes. And I've extrapolated that just to my own sort of journey to just not even worry about them at all. Just focus on this, right? In your worlds, I think that's particularly because you play in such niche areas, there is no one almost to focus on.
Yeah.
But I think it applies even in commoditized industries. So we had this very strong desire to do things properly and just have this relentless continual improvement, which began to attract the right kind of people in an industry that was notoriously difficult to attract talent. And we were literally competing with Facebook, Google, the banks, paying probably 1/3 to 1/4 of what these people were paying. So we needed to have good answers to the question, why should I work for you when I could get 3 times the salary?
Yeah.
We needed to actually be able to articulate answers to those questions.
That's a tough one. How do you do that? Because I've tried to do. I've taken it with me. I've tried to do the same thing only recently, is to attract talent to the business, and virtually no uptake on inquiries. So what is the thing that we're going to do to attract the right people, the right talent to a small business where they're being overwhelmed by the glamour and the offers of the bigger companies?
So I think, firstly, I don't know if this makes you feel better or worse, but I would say that's probably the hardest thing to do. Like, people are the best and the worst part of business, right? It's like the hardest part of business, in my opinion. I think a fundamental mistake that a lot of us make is, like, if I say to you, define marketing to me, I've kind of led you into this, so maybe you're going to disprove my point, but humor me. Define marketing to me. Like,
you're on the spot. You asked the question, my friend.
Like define marketing to me as simply as possible, in like one sentence.
One sentence. The defined marketing is putting the effort into sharing what you do, convincing other people that you're the one to go to, and
generate leads.
Generate leads. Yeah.
And that's always going to be a version of the answer. Marketing is the art of generating leads or making people aware of us, but it's about getting people top of funnel so that we can sell to them and push them down through the funnel. Almost never does somebody say it's that and it's attracting talent into the business.
Yeah.
Right? There's two sides to marketing. There's getting customers, which we all know, but there's also the marketing that we need to do to attract and retain talent.
Yeah.
And very few of us do that intentionally until we do. Until we see it, we can't unsee it. And we start just going, oh, wow, okay, every single thing we do is talking to potential clients, but also potential talent. And you do need to be able to have an answer. And in the beginning, when you start answering the question, why should people work for us versus the big guys? The answer is usually they shouldn't. But now you've had the tough conversation and you go, okay, what would we need to look like for them to want to work with us? And in our case, which I suspect could be similar to yours, is we had a couple of, like, I used to say, show me your nerd and I'll level up you, my nerd. Because I had a Dave, and the Dave was just like, he will level up everybody. He was just the nerd, right? The alpha nerd. And nerd, by the way, is the biggest compliment in the world, in my world. It's not an insult. So, but I'm kind of serious about that, is that Dave was just this absolutely ludicrously talented, smart, technical genius, and people wanted to work with him. So we started to create this reputation of, if you come and work at Nona, you will learn more than anywhere else. And we really delivered on that. So the most common thing I would get from a new person that lasted at Nona, because it wasn't for everybody, was, I've learned more in the last 6 months than I have in the previous X years. And that was what we became known for. We became known for, those are the guys that you go to when you're serious about your tech. Those are the guys you go to when you're serious about your career as a developer. So then you start thinking about who we're marketing to. We're not marketing to the 40 and 50-year-old guys and girls with families that are looking for financial stability. They should go and work at the banks. It's better for them. Objectively, it's better for them. We're looking for the 20 to 40-year-olds who are obsessive about becoming 1% developers. We're the place for you. That's the answer to the question. You should work here because you will learn more and become better at your craft than anywhere else, and then deliver on that. The hint is probably similar in your world. You're an artist, from what I understand. Probably very few people can do what you do. I'm not telling you how to do things, but don't talk about your business. Get very comfortable bragging about how amazing you are. And I'm not being funny. Like, step into that. Like, you will learn more from me than you will anywhere else. If that's true. It must be true.
Right? It can't be nonsense.
Well, we had this conversation 2 weeks ago, and you sent me a draft. And from my learnings from yourself and EO and stuff, and I said, you need to sell this. You're actually selling it. So we'd actually turned it into a sale document.
That's right.
About come work with a superstar.
And so the first part of the first draft was terrible. It was like, come and work for me at my supermarket, please. And it's terrible, but you know what? No, it's not even great. You just won't get paid much either. But
it's difficult. It's difficult to see yourself from a distance, though. Like when you realize what you are offering, if you've got your head in the game, you don't realize what it is. He's doing.
And then you rewrote it. And I thought, what? I want this job. This is fat. Oh, it is my job. And so, it changed it all. I mean, there was a couple of things there that made it sound like a superstar job that I think then, I don't know if it turned off people at the lower level who would have been, no, I wouldn't want them anyway.
So there you go.
It's marketing, right? Dan Pink wrote a book, To Sell is Human. Dan Pink is not a salesperson. He's an organizational psychologist. Like, we're selling all the time. If you have kids, you're selling all day.
Sure.
Right? Please do this. Please do that. Oh my God, please do this. Like, we're just selling all the time, and we got to just lean into that. If you're not a good salesman, you're going to struggle in business.
So the initial spark, though, your Dave guy.
Yeah.
Was it literally all built around him, and then it just
Hi,
snowballed?
Dave.
You got more Daves?
No, it was built. So Dave only came in later.
Okay.
We spent years. So Ed was the sort of, me and him ran the business, and Dave is Ed's older brother. And if Ed's listening to this, Dave's definitely cleverer than Ed. Yeah, he's the superior one, which we love to give them. And these are two of the smartest human beings you've ever met. So I just love playing them off against each other.
Excellent.
But we spent years trying to get Dave into the business, and he just wouldn't, because he was a freelance developer, making a fortune, living a great life. Just he's like, I don't need this stress. And eventually we got him in, which was amazing. That was a huge accomplishment.
Gave him heaps of stress.
Gave him heaps of stress. Yeah, made all sorts of empty promises, but we did get to the acquisition. So
it blows me away the way you treated your staff, though. I mean, that was some of the conversations we've had over the last few years. The levels, like the onboarding processes, and the way that you welcome them into your company is just incredible. And then the ongoing support and flexibility, so they can maintain these A players, is just, it's eye opening.
it was excessive, and we didn't know if it was right. I'll be honest with you.
And
so
in hindsight,
it paid off. When we did the deal, we were like, so we were right. Okay. We had no idea, right? We made these decisions very intentionally, but we didn't know. We over-indexed to such a ridiculous degree. If you looked at budgets, financial resource, time, everything, we completely we blew out any budgets in terms of what we spent in every sense of the word on our people. But the business was 100% people. And one of my mentors he was a big art collector, and behind his desk, the piece of art that he put behind his desk was this little thing that wasn't even very valuable, and it just said, "The team with the best team wins." And I'll never forget that. I saw it when I was about 22. It was that simple. The team with the best team wins. And it's hard, like, until the robots take over, that's true. And yet again, we don't show up like that. We think that we're doing them a favor by hiring. We think that we're allowing them into our organization and they should be grateful. That's insane.
30 years ago was the truth.
That was the truth 30 years ago. But markets change.
Yeah.
And in the software development world, it swung way too far the other way. We would get developers literally interviewing us, going, got 6 offers. So it swung, which was really good because it gave you a wake-up call going, this is interesting. There's a power imbalance, and now it swung the other way with all the recessionary stuff and then all the layoffs. And now, the point is, marketing is not just about getting sales. Marketing is about getting and then keeping the best possible people that you can. Yeah. And this isn't even about being altruistic and nice people. It's just good business. Yeah. Hiring people is extremely expensive. Onboarding is extremely disruptive. Like, index there, people. And yet we don't. We generally don't. We did do some crazy stuff. We were doing remote work way before it was sensible, certainly way before it was cool, and experimented with stuff like that, and because we needed to have these cool factors. We needed to say, like, what is the next cool factor? So this business, it grew 32 quickly, and we nearly died, a few times, a few near-death experiences. I've got a client that I'm working with at the moment that's got, like, I don't know how many weeks of runway in cash, but it's a good few months. And, he's understandably stressed. And I was like, man, for a large part of Nona's life, we were living with 2, 3, 4 weeks runway and like just skirting on the edge,
Wage bills coming next week.
40 developers, engineers, like scary stuff, huge overheads, not a great business model. And, that's another thing on the business model. There's a very interesting thing around it ties back to what we were talking about earlier around, like, most people are actually 2s and very few are 10s, but you don't need to be.
Yeah.
If you think about business model on a scale of 1 to 10 like this, and you think about execution, let's say excellence on a scale of 1 to 10, when your business model is like a 10, you don't actually have to be good at execution, because your business model is so good, you kind of can get away with sloppy execution, right? Because you have a moat, there's an amazing money-making engine behind it, your marketing just feeds the monster, so you can be pretty crap, you can be wasteful, you can have lots of bloat. The opposite is also true, though. When your business model is poor, like ours was, we had the worst business model, selling time for money. It is the worst form of leverage.
Yep.
So we had like a 2 out of 10 business model. But because of that, it necessitated absolute operational excellence. We just wouldn't survive if we didn't have it, because it's commoditized, you're competing on price. It's just, you have to. So this weird thing happened. We became exceptional operators, just by pure survival and necessity, not because we were that way inclined. That is really interesting, because once you have that operational excellence in your brain, you kind of can't not operate like that. And then you start to apply it once you grow up a little bit and learn a bit more about business. You start seeing better business models and apply that excellence. And now you're getting closer to a 10 and a 10, which is, the Googles of the world and what have you.
Have you always put those processes in place? I mean, I've heard you describe yourself in the past as lazy. I've never seen that in my life, but you said you've put all these processes in place to, combat that. Is that something that happened did that develop through Nona, or was that something you always had, or is it something from your sporting career perhaps that you brought through? Right. I think that's a lie, but okay.
I had an Ed. So I thought I was good operationally until I met Ed, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what good operationally looks like. I'm terrible operationally. So what I've always had is...
Is that a truthful statement, or are you just being humble?
No, that really is truthful. If Ed was here, he would be going, oh God, you have no idea, Lee. I'm a wrecking ball in a business. I come in, this idea, that idea, this idea, and I never see anything through. I never follow through. So lazy is probably the wrong word to describe me. I'm not lazy, but...
No, you're not. You're shape of the form.
An overexcited visionary.
I'm an overexcited visionary, but I don't see things through. So I'm terrible with follow through. So I'm very good at getting things started, getting people started, coming up with new things, seeing things, usually stolen from other people. I take no pride. I don't care if it's original. I put no value on originality. A lot of people don't understand that. I don't care if it's original. I care about effective. So I'll go out and read a book and find a thing and, hey, we should do this, we should do that. But I'm not the one executing on it. I'm terrible at that.
Yep.
So I'm not lazy in the sense that I sit on the couch and watch Netflix, but I'm lazy in the sense that once I've started it, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do this. And I procrastinate. I procrastinate a lot, a hell of a lot. And that's what I sort of mean by lazy, which I should stop saying lazy because that's different. But I don't...
I think it sounds like it's more, and I can understand how you feel, because once you have that idea, once you've got this thing that's burning and you've got this great, and all of this information is coming and you're developing a concept, if you need to have the team to say, right, here's the next one, take down all of this stuff. My vision is about to run out and I'm going to get bored. My mind is not being triggered and activated enough, so I need to move on to the next thing. So you run with this. Next idea comes in. And I think that unless you have that very exceptional talent, like you obviously do, to inspire the people with you, it's going to be very difficult for anyone outside to perceive that you are anything but lazy, because you don't see it through. And that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Ed used to make jokes all the time. He's like, you're actually going to do some real work ever, Mike? You're actually going to do any real work? Because, and it's fair. Because if I told you what my day looked like, it was kind of like, okay, I was kind of responsible for sales, which was a failing of the business. But even to the day we sold, like 92% of sales came through me, which is a huge risk to the business. I don't say that with pride. I say that with embarrassment.
Because I could say it with it.
Well, I couldn't fix it. We tried very, very hard to fix it.
Yeah.
So I'm proud that I was able to bring the sales in, but that is a short-term win, long-term failure.
Gotcha.
And we failed because we tried really hard to fix the sales engine, and we just couldn't.
Yep.
And that's a failure of a business of that size, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Ed used to joke about it all the time, because I wouldn't execute on anything except the sales, but it worked. Because let me just not paint the wrong picture, though. It didn't look like this. I wouldn't go, hey guys, I've got this amazing idea, and everyone would huddle around and listen to me and go, oh my God, that's amazing, Mike. And then they'd go, no.
You're a hero.
No, that is not how this went down. In fact, usually it was like, who the hell are you? Why should we believe you? That's a stupid idea. That's a dumb idea. Mike, stop bringing things. Mike, we're busy. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
So half of my role, because remember the power dynamic, we were equal shareholders. So I had the title CEO, but that was really just, the only reason we even created that was sometimes conversations were just taking so long. We needed someone to break the deadlock. There wasn't really a power imbalance, right? So what I actually became really good at was, I used to call it ginger wrangling, because Ed's a redhead and we used to call him the ginger, and he's impossible to wrangle. And my job became wrangling the ginger, because Ed is a force of nature as an executor. So if I could get him inspired, then he would be the force of 10 men. So my job actually became, how do I get this guy to want to do this? And it's quite interesting, because Jim Collins' definition of leadership is getting your people to want to do what needs to be done, not getting them to do what needs to be done, getting them to want. So that became my job with Ed. He's a very, very smart guy, off the charts intelligent, very opinionated, very articulate, therefore very, very difficult to convince and cynical. But that's what I actually became good at. And if you want to hack, if anyone's listening to this, and you want to know how to convince a difficult people, just point to evidence. So what I used to do was, hey, Ed, I think we should do this, this, and this. And I'd basically be met with like, who are you to tell me that? Then I would go, hey, Ed, I've just read this book by this person who's way more believable than me, way smarter, way more accomplished. You should check that out. He would check it out and go, Mike, this is amazing. We should do this, right? And now we laugh about it because I could point to empirical evidence. And eventually, I remember the time he literally said to me once, "You've been right enough times now that I'll believe you." And that's
trust.
Well, just credibility. Yeah. And the reason I'm going on down about this is because leadership is not like telling people what to do. It's actually getting them to want to do what needs to be done. He's far smarter than me, objectively. So we created this amazing relationship, which we hated each other for 4 years. And he's one of the closest people to me now. But we created this really amazing relationship of this sort of, in the traction terminology, they call it the visionary integrated duo. Yeah. And that was really powerful, that sort of working relationship of two completely different opposite types of people, but where they met with kind of shared values and vision. So the business went through, a couple of near-death experiences. Massive turning point in the business was when we were, technically insolvent. I had to put in all the money I had into the business just to keep it afloat. Our culture at that point was horrific. We had a shareholder that was extremely combatant, rowing in different directions. Half the people in the business didn't want to be there. I have suspicions that some malicious stuff was going on. I mean, we were in a bad place. We were a project-based business. We had been paid everything we were going to get for some projects, but we still owed them 60% of the work. Just the things that keep you up literally keep you up at night. I mean, the
so
scary
what era?
things.
Where are we now? What year are we now?
Where are we now? We're probably about 6 years into the business. So about 2018-ish, maybe a bit sooner than that, maybe 2016, something like that. And we're sitting around my kitchen table drinking far too much wine in Cape Town.
No such thing.
No such thing. And because that's what strategy offsites were for us, basically just drinking fests, which I can talk about another time because there's a direct correlation between the number of bottles of wine and the output. And it's an inverse correlation. Surprise, surprise. I'm looking around me. I'm looking around me. So we sort of had this conversation where I was like, listen, guys, we're actually in serious trouble. Like we know this. And this is a very summarized version. And it wasn't just me, but this was the narrative of like, hey, I've just read this book. It's called Scaling Up. It's kind of like the last 50 business books that I've read, put into a playbook. You guys are familiar with it. And they recommend getting a sort of full-time Gazelles coach and taking about 36 months to implement this. So here are our options. We can do that by ourselves in 3 months, or we probably should just admit defeat because the reality is we've lost. Like we're insolvent technically. We've lost, right? And we can hang our heads or we can hold our heads high because what we try to do is very difficult. We failed. Most businesses do. We had a good run. Which one are we doing? And, I'm obviously massively paraphrasing and it's not exactly how it went down, but we said, you know what, we're not going to admit defeat. So let's go. And I want to just make a point here that is important because we're sitting around the table. We're in our 20s. I was maybe early 30s, if 30. All of them were a bit younger than me, about 4 years younger than me. None of us had kids. None of us really had any, dependence. And this is important because we could actually do that. It didn't feel like it at the time, but actually we were super free. And all I had to care about was feeding literally me because my now wife, then girlfriend or fiance, she was working, I was working. Like, it's simple. You can roll the dice. And to be honest, I think you should roll the dice at that stage.
It's the time for
it. Now I have a 9-year-old and a 3-year-old and we pay for my parents and like this is not the time to roll the dice, right? And I think that's important to acknowledge if any listeners are listening to this and they're hearing me say this, but they're in their 40s with 4 dependents and like context really matters. Yeah, right. So we rolled the dice and we went obsessively hard at what I now just call business operating systems. So Scaling Up was the first one. Traction is another great one. There's a few others, and we just sort of ended up creating our own, basically, which was a mishmash of all of them. But really the point here is the decision to stop thinking you have to figure everything out for the first time every time, and actually just going,
Copy.
every single thing I'm ever going to do in business has been done by smarter, more experienced people than me many, many, many times over. So why the hell am I trying to be original here? It's just a bad strategy. But it feels weird, especially when you're like an artisan or a craftsman. I'm not. You guys both are. But the software developers absolutely see what they do as a craft.
Yeah.
So there's no real difference.
No.
Right?
Correct.
So that was a massive unlock for us. Almost just this like, what would X do? What would Y do? Right? With ChatGPT these days, you can literally create these things now. Build your board of advisors of these people and actually have these conversations, which is mind-blowing. If you haven't tried that, you really should.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. So that was the beginning of us getting through this death spiral, right? Which we came 2 weeks away from just death as a business, right? And somehow we never had to retrench anybody, which to this day is a bit of a miracle. Fast forward, I think what else is pertinent is we were the typical, you guys won't relate to this because you're highly specialized niche products, but we were highly commoditized. Basically, our target client was, if you can pay us, we will do the work for you. That was our deep specialization. Yeah. Right. And that wasn't working, because when you're not specialized and not positioned, you're basically everything to no one. You're just irrelevant.
Price war.
Yeah. So and therefore the only thing you compete on is price. So we went through a very long and very scary and very tedious process of positioning. And I won't speak too much about it because it's a very long story, but where we ended was through a lot of trial and error and a lot of scary stuff and tough conversations and experimentation, with quite a deep focus on blockchain and FinTech scale-ups that had raised north of about $10 million, that had hit product market fit, and we're now scaling. And I won't bore you with the details, but that was where we were a really great fit. Yeah. I think what's interesting to the listeners to hear is if you're even going down a positioning path, especially if you're a services business, most businesses just don't even do this work. So when I sit with a company and I start working with them, we'll always go through the same processes in the beginning. And part of those processes is just really defining and understanding their target market and the buying personas. And we've spoken about this, Lee. Most businesses don't do that, right? But of the ones that do that, sort of we go through this process and it's like, okay, so our target market is, I don't know, defense, agriculture, and finance. And within those three industries, it's the CFOs, the CEOs, and the executive assistants. And they hang out on LinkedIn and in wine bars and on the footy field. And you really do this and then you feel really proud of yourself. You're like, we've nailed it. We know exactly who we need to go after. But the phones still don't ring because you've only done one half of the equation. We know who we want to date, but they don't even know who we are yet. So they're not dating us. And that's the harder part of the equation, is asking this question: how do we become particularly relevant to them? And that's a much, much harder question. Just to sort of fast forward this whole thing, one of the guests on that podcast was the co-founder of a business called Yoko. His name's Lungisa Machoba, a lovely human being. Got him on the podcast, which was how we connected. Had a great conversation. That led to him going, what do you guys do? They became a client. 2 years later, they acquired us.
Nice.
You can draw a straight line from that. So the lessons here is not go out and start a podcast. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, not to you guys, but as a rule, even to ourselves, is figure out who your target audience is, then figure out who the personas are, validate that through actual experimentation, but then most importantly, figure out how to meet them where they are in a way that they want to be met. Most of us just never do that because it's hard and it's scary, and you can't do this on Google or ChatGPT now. You've actually got to go out and talk to people. And that's what led to our acquisition, which, by the way, from a multiple perspective in our industry, standard multiples of profit, EBITDA, usually about 5 times EBITDA. Our deal was done at nearly 30 times EBITDA.
Jeez.
And it was purely because of that two combinations, our positioning, but also we got very lucky with the market, the timing of the market.
That's incredible. What was the transition like being acquired? Because you stayed within the business, didn't you, for a couple of years to do the transition? What was that like going from employer to employee?
Yeah, so I was supposed to be there for about 5 years in total. I think I lasted 18 months.
That well.
Yeah, first time in my life. I didn't think I'd last a day. First time in my life that I ever signed an employment contract at 40 years old.
Yeah.
Look, I was actually weirdly really looking forward. Like, I've never been led in my life. You know, my dad is a leader to me.
Yeah.
I've always been captains in sport. I've always started my own businesses. I sort of realized this only when we sold. I'd never even articulated it, but someone said, like, "Hey, Mike, how do you think you'll be led?" And I was like, "Whoa, I didn't even think about that." And I actually got really excited about, like, okay, I'm going to be led by like a next level leader now. These guys have built this business they're bringing on 5,000 to 7,000 customers a month. They've raised $480 million US. Like, this is going to be the big leagues. I'm going to be led.
You're like Lancelot, and you've just found King Arthur.
Yeah, and starry eyed, 100%.
Yeah.
I didn't really get to Camelot.
Yeah. The guy with the coconut shorts downstairs.
John Cleese. It was definitely the John Cleese version. Yeah,
It looks like a very silly place. I think we'll go past.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
So, look, there's not a whole lot to share on that. It didn't really work out because this is a South African-based business. They've got an office in, Netherlands and Johannesburg, but it's all sort of GMT plus 2-ish time zone. I'm sitting in Australia. It just doesn't really work on the time zones with that kind of an arrangement. It did with Nona. So it just didn't really work. I was just so distant, so siloed. It wasn't within the areas that I'm good. The things that I'm good at, there was no place for them in this business. So, 18 months was fine. But effectively what was happening is I was being paid a lot of money to really not do very much. And depending on your nature, that might sound like a dream. But for a brain like mine, that is a very bad place to be. It is a place that leads me to self-doubt but like quite a lot of anxiety and quite like a lot of imposter syndrome. And it really did not do good things for me. And which was really interesting because you've won the business game. You've had the acquisition. Sure, it wasn't billions, but it was significant. You've won the game, if you know what I mean. And yet it was probably the lowest time I've ever had from a mental perspective. And it manifested in self-doubt, imposter syndrome, anxiety, like these weird things that you would think would be validated by something like that. And what's interesting about this, guys, is I speak super openly about this, right? In public and in my coaching and everything, because I think people need to hear it, because my suspicion was I wasn't alone in this. I can tell you now, because I have a friend who's doing her PhD on this after she had an exit and had a very similar experience. She's talking to she says on average 4 people a day now she's interviewing of founders who have successfully exited, and they're sharing how terrible the experience has been internally, not necessarily from the acquirer. That's not what I'm talking about. Like, what happens to you internally. And I don't want to spiral too much here, but I think it's got a lot to do with your identity. Is like, you are Lee, the Kyron audio guy. Yeah. You take Kyron audio away, even if it's a positive end to the story. It's like, shit, who am I? And you don't really think about this before. Yeah. You're the extremely luxury car designer, amazing person. You take that away, who are you? And the answer is usually, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But now you're not a whippersnapper anymore. So there's this really tough thing that happens. And that was not fun.
What was the experience like? Because you were very open with it on LinkedIn and stuff like that. What kind of response did you get from admitting, you have anxieties and PTSD from it? What was...
I mean, I don't know what your audience is like on this podcast, but I'll be very surprised if at least 3 or 4 people don't reach out to me after this, because it happens every time. Yeah. Usually successful people, usually founders going, oh my God, it's like you're in my head.
Well, I'm going to make an appointment for next month.
Because it's the human condition, right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing. So my experience was shit, Lee. It was horrible. But I've got an amazing wife who is ludicrously supportive and patient. And my absolute, it's so cheesy, but like my absolute rock in this.
It's not cheesy.
And it's not cheesy, right? Yeah. But it's cliche, but it's so real. It is. Yeah, I would be a mess without her. Yeah. And it just, it's difficult, but I won't shy away from it either. So like, I'll do the work as much as I need to do. Like, I'll just keep working with it. And what it's done is, weirdly, I think it's just made me quite a unique sort of, in the role that I'm playing now, call it a coach, call it a I don't know what the hell to call it. People call it a coach, but
Yep.
working with CEOs and founders, I think it's given me a bit of a superpower from an empathy perspective, because I can go there on the really dark stuff and the really difficult stuff, the really like, what stories are you telling yourself? What beliefs are holding you back? And I can go there on the tactical, strategic, just straight up, let's get your business fixed. And what you begin to see is these things are not separate.
Yeah, I was going to say they're intertwined.
They are so intertwined, so intertwined.
They're just they're just by virtue of the process. They're on the journey. They're just different points on that one journey. So it's all there. It's all going to happen at some point, assuming that you're not arrested and thrown in prison for doing something else and break that cycle and exit in a different way.
Well, that or destroy your marriage or your health or what have you, which I don't say with judgment. I say it with empathy, right? Because the stuff is very real and I see it every day.
Yeah.
You know, most of my clients, in fact, all of them, from the outside lens, you look at them and you go, these are successful, have their shit together people.
Yeah.
And they do on paper.
Yeah.
But I'm here to tell you that all of us are barely holding our shit together most of the time.
Yeah.
Even the ones that are on the front covers of magazines.
Yes.
And I think that takes enormous courage to acknowledge that about yourself. And that's only when you can start working. So everyone comes to me for business coaching.
Yeah.
Within sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 2 sessions, we're not talking about business anymore. Right.
So what were some of the techniques you use? I mean, you talk about Mike's hippie bullshit. Is that the tool bag that you go to?
That's where it started, right? Mike's hippie bullshit was my, I'll paint the scene. We started doing, strategy offsites, as everyone does. And we didn't know what the hell we were doing back in the day. They were literally just a car full of alcohol, a little bit of food, and 3 nights away, and a whiteboard.
When's the next session starting?
What could possibly go wrong? It looked a bit like this. Except this was quality alcohol. Ours was like the cheapest stuff you could get.
But they're all empty.
Slowly but surely there was less alcohol and more work done. But just totally intuitively, I remember it quite clearly. I just started one session and we sat around this room and we had a huge leadership team for a small business. There were like 5 of us in a business of 15, and then it was 7 in a business of 40. But I sat down and these are like, you got to understand these guys. These are some of the most high IQ engineering type people you've ever met. Very anarchic, very opinionated, very funny. Not the guys that would typically sit down and talk about their feelings, right? And I just started, I remember, with a glass of wine, just sort of saying, I think the first question I ever did with Mike's hippie bullshit was just some version of, which is really common now actually, is like, what is something you appreciate about everyone else? And what is something that you think that we should all appreciate about you? And it was so uncomfortable. And it was just like, we were just like, what is this bullshit?
Kicking in the dirt, looking down.
And totally.
And you promise we don't you just promise we're not going to do that now. So I think I've got to go watch it.
Yeah, you got to have a drink. Yeah. And one of them, probably Ed, just said, what is this hippie bullshit? What is this hippie bullshit? And then Jared started, CFA, our financial director, started saying, Mike's hippie bullshit. The funny thing with Mike's hippie bullshit is, at first it was like, Mike, what is this bullshit? But then it was like, in the pre-work that I would get us all to do, start, stop, continue, that sort of stuff, any requests, it started becoming like one of the things that everyone looked forward to the most was Mike's hippie bullshit. Yeah. Because we started seeing what it was doing for us. It was the only space that we were actually speaking like this. And I've started realizing this a lot, is that most, especially men, although I have a lot of female clients now, but especially men, there just is no space to talk like this. And I'm 6'5", South African, deep voice. Yeah. When I start talking really vulnerably, people are just like, what is going on here? This doesn't work. It doesn't fit. Yeah. But then often they feel, geez, well, I can also do that. Yeah. And I actually don't have to have the answers. And I can say that I'm scared and confused and anxious and I'm sorry. And there's science behind this. If you look at Patrick Lencioni, he's very famous for his 5 dysfunctions of a team. That pyramid of the dysfunctions, the first dysfunction is an absence of trust in a team. That trust that he speaks about is vulnerability-based trust. Without trust, you cannot have constructive conflict. Without constructive conflict, you cannot get to buy-in. Without buy-in, you cannot get to accountability, and without accountability, you cannot get to results. This is not hippie bullshit. That's actually pretty solid evidence-based stuff, but it came out of totally intuitive stuff. And that's basically when I'm sitting on offsites facilitating leadership teams now and doing OKRs and planning and strategy, that's the tactical stuff. Those are the outputs. But what's really happening is we're growing the competency, the maturity, and the cohesiveness of the team with the business tools. Because I'm not a therapist and I'm not a psychologist, but there's this there's this thing that bubbles around my head like business therapy, and I think it's a thing that's going to become a thing one day. It's like
it
a business
sound
therapist.
like business therapy.
You know?
It's beyond so many other aspects. It's not just one thing. It's the combination that you've got and the way that you're talking. It is a business therapy. Immediately talking about coming out of something, I felt like this. Now I'm going to go back and talk to those who are just going in and just about to experience to help them get through it. And you might just transpose coming out of the Vietnam War. I had 3 tours and I've made it through. Now these guys are just coming out and I'm going to help them with their PTSD.
Yeah,
it's a battle. It's a battle. Whether it's a battle against other people, it's a battle against a system. But at the very least, it's a battle against yourself.
Absolutely. To
a very large extent, especially with that self-doubt and that chatter. So yeah, how is it not therapy then?
Well, I'm just not qualified, right, from a degree perspective. But I think I've been through a lot of the stuff. Yeah, so yeah. I just, it's, again, sounds so cheesy, but I just want to help because I know how hard it is, and I just want to be clear about something. It doesn't get easier with success. And I think this is the thing is we go, when I just have enough money, it'll go away. Or when the business just does this, I still see myself saying that in various different ways. And it doesn't.
So that's not true?
I mean, I'm not a super wealthy guy, but no, it's not. It's just, there's a guy that I work with on some stuff, like some personal stuff. And I remember asking him something about like financial anxiety, because that's how it all manifests for me is financial anxiety, usually outside of logic, which makes it hard to work with because I can't equate it down and solve it. It's a nonsensical thing. And I remember him just saying like, don't you get financially anxious? And he said, no, not really. And I was like, how? And he goes, well, it's not money. It'll be something else. And I was like, God, that's wise.
Yeah.
He's just basically going, Mike, there's always going to be a thing.
Choose your poison.
Everything's hard, right? Yeah. Divorce is hard. Working on a marriage is hard. Choose your hard. Yeah. Being overweight and really unhealthy is hard. Training every morning is hard. Choose your hard. And this choose your hard thing is one of my internal mantras is everything's hard. But if we choose our hard intentionally, we can have really good outcomes.
Yeah.
Because most things are difficult, right? So, that sort of leads me. So that was the acquisition. It kind of leads me to today, which is an interesting thing to talk about. And at the risk of sounding like I'm punting it, which I guess I am, but it's more to talk about the thing is one of the things that I'm doing now is 2 other exited co-founders and myself, all of multi-million-dollar businesses. We've sort of had very similar experiences of all of this in very different ways. And I just sort of see a version of this problem all the time with my clients and observation, which is now quite a big sample set. And we started something called the Intentional Leaders Network. And what this thing is about is our sort of catchphrase, and at the risk of sounding like I'm selling this thing, it's more about talking about what I think should exist in the world, is it's a program and a network, but more like a space for people who want to and are ready to level up their lives, but without giving up on their business ambition. Because there is no shortage of wellness retreats and meditation retreats, and I love them. I've been on a lot of them, and I will continue to go on them. I love them. But in those things, usually like business is almost like the enemy. And anything material is almost like the enemy. And I love business. Lots of people love business. There's very few places that talk about like, how do we integrate these things? Not balance them. Balance, since the smartphone was created, it's gone. Yeah, there's no such thing. But integration, I do truly believe is possible. So we've been working hard on launching it. We'll be launching it soon, and I won't talk about too much of the launch, but I'm seeing this. We just opened applications a week ago, and we're aiming this at people who've had some success in business. So this is not for like the ultra wealthy. It's just like people who are not trying to get their fledgling startup off the ground. They've got a business. The business is going. Maybe it's very successful, or maybe it's just like ticking along, but they kind of feel like, what else? I'm not talking about super high net worths here. It's just, I see this all the time. It's like clients will come to me often when there's business is just chaotic, and they'll work really, really hard and they'll stabilize the business. And I'll kind of go, ugh. And then you know what they usually do? They drop a hand grenade in their business or in their life because they're addicted to the chaos.
Yep.
That's the one thing I observe. The other thing that I observe a lot is every single one of the people that I coach is a CEO or a owner-operator. Okay, and just to give you context, these aren't all, it's anywhere from like, I don't know, my smallest business probably does $2 or $3 million a year revenue. The biggest one probably does about 80. So they're not massive businesses. They're also not tiny startups. just about every one of them, not every one of them, shows huge amounts of discipline, measurement, rigor, consistency in their business, but not in their personal life.
Right.
So it's in them. It's evidenced by the business, but they're not taking care of their bodies. They're very overweight, or they drink too much, or they whatever the case may be, right? Or their relationships, or all of them, or some other thing, right? And we've all been there, right? But it's weird because these are disciplined people. So there's this thing of saying, how do we create the environment and the program and the tools and the accountability and the network to level up your life without giving up on your business ambition? And it seems to be resonating with people because a lot of people just sit there and go like,
I can have the cake and eat it.
I can have the cake and eat it, right? Which you can't actually.
Yeah.
But what you start to realize is you're not alone in this. You're not the only one suffering. You're not the only one thinking and feeling what you're feeling. And there are tools and they're out there. They're available.
Yeah.
So, and this is really interesting, because I think that with the advent and the proliferation of AI, which I'm right into, the business that I've invested in, and I'm the director in Warp, we've got a very significant AI offering and I'm loving it and it's exciting and we're doing great work. Yeah. At the same time, I think human connection is going to become incredibly needed, wanted, sought out, but not just drinking beer and talking about sport, like curated quality connection. Yet a lot of us really struggle with that. Like I'm allergic to small talk. I just can't do it. But most people love it because it's comfortable.
Yes.
So from a business perspective, we think there's a great sort of skating to where the puck's going to be here, saying like, hey, what if we can create these beautiful, deep, but highly practical connected experiences for people that are in business and want to still be in business and grow their business, but also work on themselves. Because what you begin to see is you get your own shit together, you're a better business operator in every sense of the word. From a brain chemistry perspective, your brain shifts from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. You just make better decisions. You're clearer. You don't have brain fog, etc. So, I'm seeing it enough, really, is my point here. I'm seeing it so much that we're actually going, let's build a thing for this. Because
let's fix it.
How common it is. And to be clear, we're not going, hey, we've solved this, we'll solve you. We're going, we need this as much as you. We may be a little bit further along with a bunch of tools, but I want this to exist for me. So I'm building it.
It's one thing to have the tools, though, isn't it? But the other thing is to implement it, right? I think that's one of the things I always struggled with. And I think back to EO, because that's something we can talk about, entrepreneurs, organization. Yeah. And I always think about those learning days, which are highly intensive. And they always used to start off the day showing a graphic of this young kid with a garden hose trying to drink from it. It's like
from the fire hose.
You know what I mean? It's like that. I mean, what's some of your tips, I guess, for actually taking action? I mean, I know you like to, like you said, you borrow from everyone, but you're very well read. But how do you implement these things into your life?
So I think that's what, I'm working hard on acknowledging what I'm good at, because I tend to deflect that. I think what I'm very good at is synthesizing and distilling a lot of information into highly simple, practical, dumbed down things to do, right? And that's what we've done here. So I'm glad you mentioned those EO learning days, because they're fantastic. They're really great.
They're amazing.
They're based for the accelerators, but I went to them for 7 years as an EO member. Like, I just think they're amazing.
They're great and they're bad for me, because I walk away going, yes, I'm so amazing. And then the next day I go, what the hell was all of that? And, the rule was always take 1%, just implement one.
And that's the kicker, right? Because they're too complex. And funny story, I actually interviewed Vern Harnish, the guy who wrote Scaling Up, which is what the learning days are based off. This is a funny story. And I was like, man, Vern, we went so deep into Scaling Up, but I reckon we implemented maybe 70% of it. Like,
it's insane.
How do you get to 100%? And he almost laughed at me and he went, what? No one gets to 100%. Like, I was like, oh my God.
Jeez, that must have been so freeing. Because the first time I got handed Scaling Up, I was like, oh God.
It's intense.
And then I got handed Traction. I went, oh, this is maybe a bit easier. And then someone handed me the, what was it, the Audible, 45-minute version.
The Blinkist version,
That's it. So, maybe I can start there.
So a couple of insights you actually shared there, right? Number one, it's all about the implementation. And this is the problem, is you sit in those rooms and they're amazing and they're inspiring. And that is valuable, to be clear.
Absolutely.
But then you go away and you do exactly nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And then you actually often end up feeling bad about yourself because you're like, oh, there I go again, talking the talk, but not walking the walk, which is a very common thing, right? And then the narrative starts. Everyone else can execute, but I can't. Why am I so rubbish at this? Why can they do it, etc.? So a large part of this is, and this is not going to come as a surprise, this is pretty simple, but a very large part of this is who you are doing it with. Accountability, right? But structured accountability, not just I'm doing it with mates. When do you say you're going to do what? How will you measure it? What's the target? What's the mechanism? What's the time? What's the channel? What's the everything? There's just no room for exposure.
Can I interrupt you there?
Yeah, please.
One of the hard things is measurement too. Like, I always find it hard with these tools that have measurements, and I can see it for a numbers game, for for accounting, all your finances. But when it comes to the grey areas, the human relationships or all those types of things, I find it hard to put a number to it.
Okay, so let's go there. Can we go there?
Yeah, go there.
Yeah,
do
cool.
it.
So tell me about a grey area. Tell me about a part of your life that you are serious about improving.
I guess
to the degree that you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, I guess we're just talking about within my own business, creating better communication channels and stuff like that. How do you implement? How do you score that?
Okay.
I guess.
So what I heard you say is that you're serious about improving communication channels in your business.
Yeah.
Why?
I guess it's because it's a need. It's a personal need of mine, I suppose, to maintain those communication levels. It's something I work better with feedback.
Okay. Why do you work? Why is it a personal need? You said because you work better with feedback?
Yeah, and I guess I like the team.
Okay.
I like a team environment.
You like a team environment. Okay. I'm going to go quickly here. Did you take a bit more time? But can you tell me, do you know when the team environment is good or when it's bad? What are the indicators?
I do we gut feel.
Gut feel?
Yeah.
Okay. And can you tell me, are there any leading indicators? Are there things you can do that result in a gut feel being better, in a team environment being stronger?
I guess it's just getting on the front foot.
Okay.
And starting a conversation.
So starting a conversation with who?
People in my team.
Yeah. How many people in your team?
A couple.
2?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. What kind of conversation? In person?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or on Zoom?
Or Zoom occasionally, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a measurement, and don't underestimate that, right? So if I was in your shoes, I would literally say, Lee, how do we make this easy? What's the easy version of improving communication?
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing.
Yeah.
So a metric there, and I'm not even kidding, I've just heard you say that you like to feel connected. When you're talking to them frequently, you feel more connected. It's a gut feel, but you talk to them. So literally my scorecard for you, or your scorecard for you, would be conversations with Bob.
Yep.
Target every week, 3. Actual, measure it. You've just described to me what the lever is.
Yep.
Talk to the guy.
Yep.
And yet we wonder how we improve communication. It happens all the time. I'll give an example. My wife, right? I'm serious about continually working on my marriage. But to have a thing that says work on my marriage is usually what people will say. I want to work on my marriage.
Yeah.
What the hell does that mean?
Define it.
What the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
I know that my wife's love language is acts of service. So I know that, which blows my mind. But if I go into the kitchen and clean the kitchen and unpack the dishwasher and pack the dishwasher and wipe the surfaces down, it's like it just makes her heart melt. Like she just falls in love with me all over again. To me, it does exactly 0. I wouldn't even notice. But to her, that is a massive act of love. So on my habit tracker, every day it says act of service for Georgia, because I know that if I stop and do something, that is how I communicate with her in a way that she wants to be loved. It doesn't say work on my marriage.
Yeah.
What's the easy version? There's always an easy version.
Break it down.
Break it down. Right. So that was a really super fast example, but this is how we've got to think.
Yeah.
We say we want to improve communication. Well, then talk to the person. We say we want to make more profit. Are you measuring profit? We say we want to make more sales. Well, how many input calls are you making a week? Do you know those numbers? This stuff is not complicated, but it's bloody difficult. Right. And this is where the accountability needs to come in. And this is why we're trying to build this program, because using common language and then putting the network, the people around you into it, where you're using the same terms for the same things and then holding each other accountable can be an incredibly powerful thing, like a life-changing thing for the right people at the right time. Does that, and I mean, feel free to push back.
No, that's good.
Is that clarifying?
Yeah, 100%.
I wonder if, so for my situation, and I think many people like me, when you sole practice, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you talk about that of course, that just makes logical sense. And I'm going to try and have another look at what I'm doing. And I'm everything you're saying, I'm thinking, I'm making notes because I'm going to start thinking differently about my own business. So for someone like me, a lot of these things on the outside will look self-evident once you analyze it. But when there are 50 or 60 things that you're trying to juggle at the same time as deliver a product or whatever it is, it's hard to see. And then when you do see them, it's hard to prioritize which ones do you do first.
Yeah.
So how does the person how do we do that? How do we start to first, how do we get ourselves in a position where we can be introspective and look at ourselves in the business? And then how do we, once we've done that, what sort of mechanism we're going to use to identify those things and then set some priorities?
It's a great question. And I think, I'll give you the weak answer first and then we can talk about it. Like, the weak answer is, this is why good coaches exist.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard.
Yep.
Okay. That's the weak answer. That's the cop-out answer.
That's the answer I wanted, because I didn't want you to have a simple answer that made me think, oh, I'm just pathetic.
You're definitely not pathetic. The fact that you're even asking the question means you're not pathetic. So, my coach, I had an amazing coach who I never saw his face, which was quite weird. But he wouldn't put his camera on. He was in New York. It was the weirdest thing. I worked with him for like 2 years, and I never saw his face. I'm glad you said that, because I thought you were in some sort of dark room and he was wearing a mask. What's he coaching you? Yeah.
What's he coaching you?
Special kind of coach, yeah. And he just say, Mike, it's really hard to read the label from the inside of the bottle, man. And it's just stuck with me. Like, it is really hard to read the label from the inside of the bottle. And you hinted at it there, because often I'll have these, clients who go like, God, Mike, that's amazing. How did you see that? I'm like, dude, it feels amazing to you. If we were reversed, you would do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's always easier.
It's just a really good coach or mentor or friend even doesn't try to fix you. Acknowledges that you're not broken. Also acknowledges that you know your business better than I will ever know your business. My job as a coach, or this kind of role, is not to know your business. It's to help you sort through your head for you to see it. Okay, so that's the weak answer. The slightly harder and longer answer is, overwhelm and anxiety is kind of on the other side of the spectrum of clarity. So what often happens with me, and I really am in this most of my life, is overwhelm or anxiety or both will come up. And then what I'll do, and what most people will do, is we will run faster, because we will think that the reason I'm anxious and overwhelmed is because of my big to-do list. And so if I can just get to the to-do list, then it will get better. And I'll ignore what Mike said because he's wrong and it's fine. I'll just get through the to-do list. That doesn't combat overwhelm and anxiety. What combats it is focusing on clarity, not velocity. And usually when we sit down and make the time to use tools like the Eisenhower matrix. I don't know if you're familiar with the Eisenhower matrix.
You have shown, I forgot about that.
Google it if you want. It's very useful. It's just important and urgent, not important, not urgent.
Yes.
It's a very useful tool, but whatever, that's just a tool. But sit and just go, okay, I've got 74 things that I think I have to do. I cannot defy the laws of physics because that's 700 hours of work and I only have 6 hours. And get ruthless with yourself, as eye-rolly as this sounds, and go, if I just do one thing today, just one. What is that thing and why? And you need to get ruthlessly excellent at that. That's the work. But it's a bit like meditation. A lot of people think meditation is about reaching your Zen state, and that's not meditation. Meditation is sitting there in agony, and every time your thought wanders and you think about work or relationships, every time you catch it and come back to the breath, that's meditation. Not sitting with no thought. My dad taught me to meditate when I was 9. I don't think I've had 1 second of experience with no thought, and I'm 42. That's not meditation. Prioritization is not going, know what it is. It's the discipline of just going, Nice to have, essential, nice to have. Now, the Eisenhower matrix is a really nice, useful tool because what it does is you categorize your things into important and urgent. So it's a 4x4 matrix.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to try to picture it, but if you Google it, you'll find it everywhere. If it's both important and urgent, you do it now.
Yep.
If it is important, but not urgent, you put it on your calendar. You schedule it now.
Yep.
If it is urgent, but not important, you delegate it. And this is where it starts to get hard, especially as a sole practitioner. But this is where you start putting them into the buckets and you'll start realizing, what the hell am I doing spending my time on this stuff? It's not high value. I've got to get a VA or a student or something. You've got to solve that. Yeah. If it's not important and not urgent, you kill it. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
Whole bunch of nice to haves. They go. I've told you all sorts of stuff today. I told you to look up the Eisenhower matrix. I've mentioned 3 books. That probably falls under the not important and not urgent bucket. Nice to have, kill it.
So probably using the Eisenhower matrix, I've discovered that the Eisenhower matrix is the thing that I need to take with me most.
You've just created the infinite loop.
But I put a stop in it because I realised it's not important or is it urgent.
Well, maybe
so it's in the bucket.
What was that other great quote? If you've got more than 3 priorities, you've got none.
Yeah, I start most of my annual planning with that because a lot of business operators that don't understand their business will make themselves feel better by making huge lists of priorities and long verbose statements. The people that really get it go, we have one thing we do this quarter, just one thing.
Yep.
Right. And I see this, guys, I've been doing this for a long time with a lot of different businesses, and it's the same every time. Businesses that deeply understand their business, their scorecard metrics will be like 5 to 15.
Yep.
Ones that don't and are out of control, they'll be like 50.
Yep.
It's noise.
Yeah.
Right. And they'll defend it. They get very defensive when I challenge them on it. But what are these things rolling up to? And that's why things like scorecards are really, really valuable in your business because they can help you see your physical reaction. It's like, shit, it's like,
I'm picking up, thinking, right, I'm on it. I'm there. I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm going to be in it.
But, I want to acknowledge that it's like, these things are cool, Mike, but like I've got to do the work so that I can invoice and get paid and eat. And yes, that's true. The stuff is not linear. It has to happen all at the same time. Yeah. But that's what you're signing up for when you want to be a business. That's business. Yeah. Right. And so I think, back to your sort of statement or your question, like how do you do it? The soft answer is get someone to help you through it, which I do. I wouldn't do what I do now if I didn't believe that it works. Yeah. But in the absence of that, you have to be that for yourself. And being that for yourself is really about getting to the core of everything all the time, asking why 5 times. Eisenhower matrix, is this critically important, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Naval Ravikant is quite famous. Do you know who he is?
I do not.
So he's worth checking out. He had a tweet storm that's still the most viewed tweet storm ever on Twitter.
And what was his name again?
Naval Ravikant, Naval Ravikant, self-made billionaire, Silicon Valley investor, came from very poor India, ludicrously amazing thinker. And he wrote this tweet storm, which was how to get rich without getting lucky. And it's one of the most dense, amazing pieces of content I've ever come across.
Yep.
It was pulled out into a podcast episode. It was about 4 hours. It's the best piece of content I've ever come across. It's my most listened thing. I've shared it about 1,000 times. And then a guy called Eric Jorgensen picked it up and wrote the Almanac of Naval, which is just that extrapolated into a book, which is free, by the way. It's an ebook. And he just has so many pearls of wisdom. But one of the things that he did way before he had any money, so he did not have money when he did this, and this is important that data point is clear. He decided that his time was worth $5,000 an hour, way before it was, when he had no money. But he lived his life. He decided my time is worth $5,000 an hour. So he would not do anything that he didn't deem was worth $5,000 an hour. So he said, like, his friends would think he is nuts. He tells a story where he bought a speaker set and they're broke and he just threw it in the trash, even though they're under warranty, because it wasn't worth his time. But he wasn't sitting on the couch watching Netflix with his time. He was building and building and building. Way before his time was worth $5,000 an hour. And I take almost every one of my clients through this process at some point. And you can do a silly calculation if you want, which is take your business's revenue, extrapolate that back down into an hourly rate. You'll get an hour. But at the end of the day, it's a decision. What is my time worth? And if you can really embrace that decision, you'll start getting much better at the things you were talking about.
Yeah.
When you go, my time is worth $1,000 an hour. Suddenly, when you start doing all your tasks, you go, oh, that's a $10 an hour job. That's a $10 an hour job. It's a $20 an hour job.
Yeah.
I have to fix that.
That's when you stop wasting time on thinking, well, I'm going to take time off and go and fix my own taps because it's cheaper if I do this. And you realize, well, if I do my job better and I invest and I keep that going, I can pay someone else to fix the taps. Yep. They'll do it in an hour, I'll take 10, and they'll do it right. And I'll save money by actually paying someone else. And you can just clear the decks of a lot of stress, I think. That sounds like you could do that.
Yeah. Where are your $1,000 an hour jobs? Where are your $10,000 an hour jobs? Where are your $100,000 an hour jobs?
Yeah.
Right. And if you start thinking like that, and it's just a decision, like this is what's, and I need to be clear about this. It's a decision. He was not worth $5,000 an hour when he did this. I think he said he was worth about $20 an hour.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset. And quite often the pushback that I get from this is like, oh, Mike, but that's stupid. I love mowing the lawn. It's de-stressing. Great. That's a $1,000 an hour job. But be intentional about it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's valuable. It's very valuable to do the de-stressing things. Right. But there's certain things that I will do at home and certain things that I won't do and just pay people for that reason.
Yeah.
Right. So, I believe that question you asked is almost one of the questions around successful people, is those that are ruthlessly capable of prioritizing things without actually knowing are the people who I see, generally performing at a much higher level, because it's very easy to keep ourselves busy.
Yeah. Too true. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Before we leave, though, we've got a tradition on the show that we ask, how do you define success?
Yeah. I struggle with this question. It's like I struggle with purpose. I think there's no real nuggets here. When I think about success now, it's, in fact, I'm almost going to quote Naval again, almost directly, because it just is in my head. He defines success as being able to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want. And I've been contemplating that for a long time, and it's hard. It's hard for me to find a better definition. I have a lot of financial anxiety, yet I have no inclination to be mega wealthy or anything. It really is about freedom. Do I have the freedom to do what I want to do? But as I'm getting older, it's as important who I'm doing it with. And that's kind of where I am. I think it's a very powerful question, actually, because I don't think a lot of people can truly define it for themselves. They might put great sounding sentences together, but my observation of people, I often ask my clients, what do you want?
Yeah.
None of them ever actually give me a coherent answer that sticks. And I think it's one of those existential, continually evolving questions. So very unsatisfactory answer, but I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Mike.
No, that's great.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yes,
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's really good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Cheers.
And to the listeners, I hope that you enjoyed that as much as we did. Thanks for listening to the show. And if you'd like to find out more about Kyron Audio or Deverson Design and how we can create bespoke luxury environments and experiences in your life, you're more than welcome to book a call with one of our principals through our websites, kyronaudio.com.au or deversondesign.com.au, or follow us on our socials.